right, I think we can get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this roundtable featuring women leaders in the energy transition. With this event, we are excited to contribute to COP29's Gender Day, a day dedicated to prioritizing and centering gender equality on the COP29 agenda. This day recognizing that climate change has a disproportionate impact on women. It also marks the importance of increasing the representation of women-led climate solutions at COP and globally, and the need to enhance women's leadership in the energy transition. Next slide, please. My name is Valentina Guida, and I'm a senior associate with RMI's Energy Transition Academy, or ETA. And today I will be hosting alongside our principal, Amber Zinhult. Next slide, please. So I will start by setting some context for the event and introducing our panelists before moving into the roundtable portion of the event. At the end, we'll also have some time for Q&A and a few concluding remarks and announcements. Next slide, please. So for those of you who may not be familiar, RMI is a nonpartisan, independent nonprofit organization working to accelerate the clean energy transition and improve lives. We work with individuals, corporations, communities, foundations, and government leaders around the world to create a clean energy future for all. At the center of our work is a focus on a just energy transition, one that equitably distributes the benefits of the clean energy economy so that no one is left behind. Next slide, please. RMI is organized around three core areas: geography, sector, and market catalyst. We scale our solutions in climate critical geographies. So right now we're working on projects in around 60 countries around the world, including the US, China, India, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and small island developing states. We tend to focus on decarbonizing the four key sectors that will make the biggest impact: electricity, buildings, transportation, and industry. And because the clean energy transition and the clean energy adoption more broadly by itself isn't enough, RMI taps into 6 powerful market catalysts to drive impact at scale: capacity building and education, policy, technology, communications, data, and finance. Next slide, please. So the Energy Transition Academy that Amber and I are representing today is RMI's global capacity building and leadership development platform. We support energy leaders and practitioners in advancing their skills, know-how, and networks to take action and advance climate and clean energy projects. We work closely with our regional partners to design action-oriented offerings, both in person and online, and we facilitate peer-to-peer learning, advanced problem solving, and sharing sessions, and sharing best practices and lessons learned. Elevating women leaders who are driving the energy transition is a top priority for the ETA and RMI. And for this reason, we're very thrilled to host today's panel of distinguished women who are making significant strides in the renewable energy sector. Next slide, please. So on our roundtable today, we have an incredible set of women leaders representing the Energy Transition Academy Fellowship Programs, the Africa Mini Grids Program, or AMP, the Women in Renewable Energy, or WIRE Network, the Climate Finance Access Network, also known as CFAN, and Sustainable Energy for Alls, or SC4Alls network across the Caribbean, India, the Pacific, and Sub-Saharan Africa. I'll introduce our panelists one by one now. Next slide, please. So, Nitisha Agrawal is the founder and director of the Smokeless Cookstove Foundation, also consulting director for social impact at Micro Energy Credits, and mentor for the Women in Clean Cooking program hosted by the Clean Cooking Alliance, Sustainable Energy for All, and the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition. She's an ex-corporate who quit her career of 17 years in marketing communications to set up her own nonprofit and is now a dedicated grassroots and social impact practitioner working with the most marginal communities in India. Thank you for joining us, Nitisha. Next slide, please. Nika Prescott is the Regional Manager of the Caribbean for the Climate Finance Access Network hosted by RMI. An international development cooperation practitioner, Nika has more than 13 years of experience in the areas of climate change mitigation, adaptation, disaster resilience, resource mobilization, and partnership development. Her experience covers small island and developing states, landlocked developing countries, and least developed countries, with her work assignments covering the sustainable development and energy transition agenda in global small island and developing states, as well as accelerating the energy transition and advancing resilience to climate change in African countries. Nika is also an alumnus and member of the WIRE network. Thank you for joining us. Next slide, please. Soda Popoy holds a bachelor's degree in chemical and energy engineering and a master's in energy systems from Oxford University. Before her current role as a technical assistant on the UNDP AMP Africa Mini-Grids program at Nigeria's Rural Electrification Agency, she worked as a hydrogen analyst. Soda also served on the board of the Abuja section of the Society of Petroleum Engineers. She's passionate about advancing environmental sustainability and socioeconomic development across Africa. Thank you for joining us. Next slide, please. Tien Thomas serves as the Deputy Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Investment and Trade for the Turks and Caicos Islands government. Until 2022, she spent most of her career in the energy industry, where she specialized in business development, innovation, and renewable energy. She is a proud member of the WIRE network and a past fellow of RMI's ETA. Next year, Tien will also be a mentor with WIRE as well. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you all today. Next slide, please. Great, so before we jump into the exciting panel discussion, I wanted to share some context on why we need to talk about women's leadership and empowerment in the context of the energy transition. And just noting here that by women, we refer to both women and women identifying people. So a just and inclusive transition must respond to the needs of diverse stakeholders, including women, as gender is one critical factor that heavily influences the framing and potential of climate solutions. Women's leadership in renewable energy is critical to advancing the energy transition. But despite progress, women are still largely underrepresented in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields, also known as STEM. So women representation in the renewable energy sector remains low, with women representing only around 30% of the renewable energy workforce. And the gender imbalance in the workforce is reflected also in boardrooms and other leadership tiers, as women in the energy sector are far outnumbered by their male counterparts. A 2022 World Economic Forum study of more than 150 countries revealed that 80% of senior management roles in the energy transition are held by men. And fewer women are hired into senior roles in the energy sector than in most other industries. According to International Energy Agency data, in the power sector, women also only represent around 14% of senior leadership and only 5% of executive board membership. So why is it important for more women to enter the renewable energy space? As I mentioned, gender is a critical factor for climate solutions, and we need solutions that take into account the disproportionate effects of climate change. According to World Bank research, women leaders take more corporate action to confront climate change. And they're also more likely to build successful organizations that address social needs and produce a higher return on investment. Climate finance for women-led efforts also still remains scarce in the field. but on-the-ground solutions need more amplification and support, and many of these projects are being spearheaded by women. Next slide, please. So in today's session, we will hear stories from women leaders working across the globe to advance the energy transition and hear their experiences and insights into empowering women in renewable energy. We want to elevate the voice of women working in the renewable energy field and the energy transition by highlighting the role and contributions of women leaders from across the world. Throughout the session, we invite the audience to ask questions in the chat for our panelists, and we will do our best to answer them during the Q&A session at the end. Please feel free to use the Q&A box to submit your questions throughout the panel. So with this, I am very excited to hand it over to Ember and our wonderful panelists to dive into the discussion. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Valentina. We'd love to start out by hearing a little bit about each of our panelists' journeys into the renewable energy space. So Natisha, why don't we start with you and tell us a little bit about your experience and what led you to being the founder and director for the Smokeless Cookstove Foundation, as well as your other involvement within the sector.
Thank you, and I hope I'm audible. Greetings from India, and I hope everyone's having a lovely day. Thanks a lot, Valentina, Amber, the RMI team, SE for All, and everybody else to put this very powerful panel together. Gender Day. I think the word, Gender Day itself is comes with a lot of weight. So for me, while the journey was not something that I had planned, but once I got into it, I got hooked onto it. And I realized that everyday energy drudgery of women in rural as well as urban is something that often goes unnoticed, especially in the rural sector where the day begins with trying to start a cook stove or find a light or start some sort of a gadget inside the house that requires energy. And the whole day is around the energy compass. So it was fascinating for me to realize that how the entire day of the woman is governed by this thing. And if there is drudgery around this particular aspect, which is access to energy, then really nothing is going right for that woman or her household, right from her own health to well-being to the opportunities that she could offer to her children, to the next generation, to the ability to earn better income opportunity for herself and contribute to the household, and then stepping out of her own house into her little village, her little environment and its impact on environment at large. Everything starts from energy. So I think that for me became the hope for me to start Smokeless Cookstove Foundation. And largely, Smokeless Cookstove Foundation acts as a catalyst to invite women who belong to very, very deprived and marginal section to start thinking about what it means to choose better for themselves when it comes to energy options. And often in countries like India and many other countries, there is lack of awareness. It is not the lack of intention, but there is lack of awareness. And that also then sometimes is added with lack of opportunities. So what we try to do through Smokeless Cookstove Foundation is to provide that opportunity to open up dialogues in the space of energy. We may begin with improved energy options specifically for cooking, but the idea is to bring to them aspects that are related to more renewable forms of energy access. At least bring them the opportunity and then help build their capacity to be able to choose better. So I think that journey for me has been very fascinating from corporate to the space. And only when I'm working with the women, I see the change because, when they are able to understand this drudgery and the opportunity that comes along with it, they become ambitious and they become, greedy to choose better for themselves. So that's what we want to do more, bring more women into this conversation.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And you raised some really important points around the connection between energy access, day-to-day life and well-being, and the inspiration that you've taken to make an impact there. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think there's some differences, but some parallels to the work, Sada, that you're doing with the Africa Mini Grids program. So maybe we'll go to you next, if you could share a little bit about your journey into the renewable energy space and what motivates you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Amber. And that was a very impactful story, Nitisha. So I'm Sauda Boboy, and as you've already mentioned, I work in the UNDP and Rural Electrification Agency Africa Mini Grids program. And I'd say that my journey into the renewable energy space started from when I was young, and it was driven by my family and my community as a whole. So my parents ignited in me an interest in sustainability from a very young age, when I was a teenager. And my decision to make this a career path came as a result of a dichotomy that I noticed from the abundant sunlight that's present in the Sahelian northeastern Nigeria, where I'm from, and the scarcity of electricity, which has impacted a lot of people's lives in that community. So when I learned about solar power in school and how it could be used for solving global challenges like climate change, but at the same time providing cheap electricity to people, it was a no-brainer for me to pursue this. So I started off with studying a chemical and energy engineering degree, and then decided to do a multidisciplinary master's in energy systems that showed me both the social science and the sort of science tech perspectives of this system, which is both sides are important in order to achieve any change or move the needle. So after my education, sorry, I decided to get some experience in sort of the business side as well, because that's also important. So I wanted to have a sort of multidisciplinary, balanced knowledge and experience to be able to contribute when I moved back home to Nigeria. After this experience, I leveraged my network to sort of find opportunities, and I was fortunate to be able to come back and serve in the government and in this UNDP program. But in general, what I would say is the key thing that defines my journey is the value of community. So from the beginning, my initial motivation was around wanting to make a difference in my community, and I received a lot of support from my parents along the way. And then also my network sort of gave me the roots that helped me to be able to contribute in this space in general.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Sada, and very inspiring to hear how communities both motivated you as well as part of the solution that you're seeking to provide energy access as well as address climate change, which of course impacts communities first and foremost. Why don't we go to Tian, and we'd love to hear a little bit about your journey into the renewable energy space and what motivates you. Oh, we can't hear you there, Tian. Tian, we can't hear your audio. Can you turn that up a little bit? We're still not hearing you. Why don't we go to Naik and give you a second to just play with your audio a little bit and see if we can get that adjusted. Naik, how about tell us a little bit about your journey with renewable energy and how you came to be working with CFAN, and also you were part of the Women in Renewable Energy Network as well.
Yes, thanks, Amber. Firstly, a huge kudos to RMI for hosting and taking the initiative to host a session like this during Gender Day. And also thank you for the invitation to CFAN to sit on the panel today. My journey into this space was definitely not linear. I love to hear Saudatu's story or her background with, her family pushing her into this space and community. It's not very often I get to reflect on where I started. So when I started this journey into this space 20 years ago, keeping in mind my family is very strongly entrenched into the oil and gas industry. So 20 years ago in the Caribbean, no one knew anything about renewable energy. My father thought renewable energy was zoology. So when I graduated, he used to send me jobs to take care of animals. So it's definitely not been linear. And in a way similar to Natisha, I kind of fell into it. Went to the University of the West Indies in Mona, Jamaica, enrolled in geology, and also did a double major just in case. And the double major ended up being the passion. So the other major was alternative energy. And since then, I've been, working in the space, disaster risk reduction, climate change, working with great partners globally to get to this point. One thing that I'd like to just pick up also from Saudatu is that there's support in different ways. It may not look like someone cheering you on directly, but the support manifests itself in different ways. Even my father sending me zoology jobs is a type of support. I mean, now he sends me things on UNFCCC. So he's gotten there. He's gotten there. But there's persons rooting for you, even though they may not know what they're rooting for. And they're rooting for, the climate change space, the renewable energy space, and they're rooting for you to become a champion in that space and to establish your cohorts and your communities and participate in discussions such as this. And it's up to us as stewards. I mean, thank you for calling me a leader, but I would like to call myself a steward. It's up to us as stewards to also usher in the next generation, even though we may not understand what the new tech is. So we can, I always try to think I can be my father in maybe next 20 years, where some young person may say, I'm in so-and-so. I have no clue. But you know what? I'm going to give you that kind of support. But definitely my journey has not been linear, but every experience that I've had has contributed to not only my competency, but my networks, and also has really enriched the experience thus far to now where I'm at the Climate Finance Access Network as regional manager for the Caribbean, really bringing and engaging with partners that are within the field, private sector and public sector, as well as climate finance advisors, all looking to resource mobilize to get finance to implement projects. And these can be the mitigation projects, renewable energy, as well as adaptation projects as well. So it's not been linear, but it's been great.
Well, that's great, Naik, and thank you so much for sharing your journey. And a couple of things that I really love that you talked about is your role as a steward. I think that's a really nice framing, and also not only how you were able to lean on community support, even if it was a little bit to the side of maybe direct renewable energy support, but that support for you in growing your career. But at the same time, I think calling that you emphasized of feeling a need to give back to the next generation and really support up and coming professionals in their journey. So I love that. Tian, why don't we go to you, and we'd love to hear a little bit about your role. And you've been not only a member of WIRE and growing into a mentor role, but also moved through your work with Fortis TCI and now with the government of Turks and Caicos. We'd love to hear a little bit about your journey. We're still not hearing you for some reason.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Perfect. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Okay, great. So yeah, I was thinking back as others were answering. about my journey a little bit and what I would share in the limited time. But I think my journey has been an interesting one. I did start with the local utility company Fortis TCI as a very excited intern joining an implementation team, which at the time I didn't really know what it was for. But with my background in economics, they thought I would be a great fit. Turns out the company was on the verge of a very transformative journey into the renewable energy, clean energy space, as it acknowledged what was really going on in the country and how it can contribute to starting that change, because at a wider country level, not much was going on. And seeing the effects of what we have to deal with and how climate change is rapidly evolving, it was a very timely start. So that led me into a team that brought on the business development and innovation for what is now two main renewable energy programs offered by the utility, which is the utility-owned renewable energy and the customer-owned renewable energy programs that really gave me my introduction into renewable energy and its impact and how transformative it can be and how we can incorporate this in the energy mix, which later led on to resource planning and the like, and my introduction into more of the education side, which led me to WIRE at the time, which was under Cadillac. And then that also led me to RMI, which has just been a phenomenal experience for me, which I can definitely say catapulted my career, leading me to end my time at Fortis TCI and transition to government, because with that knowledge, I really thought I had an impact to make from a country level now with the government, and how the onus is on us as a government to implement those plans, have the framework in place to really take the country to the next level as it relates to the clean energy transition. And so that has been a quick snapshot of my journey to date. Now I'm in the finance arena, where I hope to bring that same contribution as we look to more gender budgeting, sustainability metrics, and how all of that plays into the clean energy transition.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Tian. And I love the weaving of your background in economics and business development and how that's led to not only transforming your own career within the space, but also transforming a utility, which is huge, and really growing that whole renewable energy portfolio for Fortis TCI, which is really, really inspiring. I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the challenges that women experience entering and advancing their careers in the renewable energy space. We spoke a little bit about what's inspired you. What have you found difficult? Let's start maybe with Sada.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that so participating in the renewable energy space provides sort of its own unique challenges, but then as a woman, there's also a bit of additional barriers that you might face. So speaking from the context that I come from, one main hurdle that I've noticed a lot of women commonly face is this sort of sociocultural barrier. So if I can expand a little bit further, it's where there's this sort of sociocultural perspective that feeds into the professional space, where sometimes it can be on a positive note where women are treated a little bit more leniently than men are. But then at the same time, it could also be a double-edged sword where when there are opportunities for more sort of leadership positions or demanding positions, women aren't often the first choice because of that perspective of not thinking of them as the right candidates. But at the same time, something that my mentor tells me is that the best way to approach it is to take advantage of those seeming disadvantages and turn them into advantages. And the reason for doing that is because trying to sort of go against the grain of the social-cultural context doesn't always bring the best solutions, and often there's more impact by sort of using the existing context to your advantage. Perhaps it makes sense to give an example here where if, for example, so there's an example where when you're in a meeting, a lot of the time, so this is not my personal experience, but somebody else's, where she's sort of relegated to the position of being a secretary. And because she's a woman, but not considered to be sort of like the chairman, which is always thought of as the man, right? And what she did was to take advantage of that by getting herself into rooms where she would normally not have been able to get into, and using that to develop herself and to propel her career even further, and helped her to get into positions that she normally wouldn't have been able to get into. So the main sort of takeaways were to use the existing powers or align yourself with existing sort of, even if it's sort of men in powerful positions that can give you mentorship or guidance or support you, but also other opportunities that you get because of your gender, which could have been challenges, but then taking advantage of them and using them as strengths as well.
I love that example, Sada, of really looking for the hidden opportunity and what might seem like a disadvantage. That's a really great tool, and looking for mentorship. And I heard you mention your mentor as well. I'd love to hear a little bit in thinking about your journey with leadership in the space. How has a mentor impacted you?
I'd say that I cannot overstate the value of having mentorship in this space at all. So I think the value that I've gotten from mentorship is by helping me to learn how to navigate the space, learning all those skills that you don't necessarily learn in the classroom. So when you're out in the real world, it's good to have an experienced person to guide you and to help you not make the same mistakes that they've made before. One thing that I would say is that there could be better and more structured sort of longer term mentorship opportunities within this space. I don't think there's enough at the moment. And I think that's really valuable. So one experience that I've had was when I was working in my previous job, I had a boss. So it was a female boss. And when I first started working there, she sat with me and asked me to come up with four professional skills that I want to develop within my career, within the company. And then when I did, she asked me to write down a goal for each of those skills. And every 2 weeks, she would sit with me and go through all the goals that I had set previously, and then ask me if what I've done to achieve them and what I haven't done, how I was struggling or what support I needed. And she would always give me feedback as well, and then ask me to write additional goals for the next 2 weeks. And we did this almost every fortnight. And doing this long-term sort of intentional mentorship experience developed me professionally, and it provided a sort of a lasting impact on me. And I think I appreciate it even more now thinking back than when I was going through the experience. So I think having sort of structured longer-term mentorship is very important, and there could be more of that in this space than there is at the moment.
That sounds like a really impactful mentorship opportunity, and really appreciate you sharing your experience there. Naika, I'd love to hear from you a little bit, both about your experience with mentorship, but also what do you see as some of the challenges that women are facing within the renewable energy sector?
Thanks, Amber. And also going to piggyback a bit on Saudatu's intervention. For me, I think it's twofold. And part of it has come through or come out of me being a part of mentorship programs, as well as in my own role, taking on that mentorship hat with my own colleagues, where I believe there are two, as I said, it's twofold. One being perception, and another being creating spaces for us. When we speak of perception, we usually say, oh, it's because men don't believe women are technically capable enough, or we are competent enough, or we're not strong enough to undertake physical tasks, etc., where those types of jobs require it. That is true. But there's also a flip side, where when you speak to, sometimes, when you speak to younger persons coming up, and younger women coming up in the field, they themselves hold this perception that they may not be as skillful, opportunities to learn more because of an inherent fear of failure. I always like to think that women are we are perfectionists. We don't want to get it wrong. We want to have it perfect. All lines must be parallel. And I always say women need to be more risky. I've had a male colleague call me risky already. That I take risks, and I said, no, I take calculated risks. And if my risks don't work out, I am willing to take the accountability for it. So whereas, yes, we may have the external perceptions of what women can and cannot do, we ourselves have to start, as I like to say, hyping ourselves up. We must take the risk. We must try to step out of the path, the well-trodden path. I'll move on to the point of creating spaces for ourselves as well. Even part of WIRE, so the Women in Renewable Energy Network, which is predominantly a Caribbean-based mentorship program, is a space for women in the field of renewable energy to network and get to know each other, to talk about issues just like this, but also as a platform for exchange, knowledge and competency building, and it helps with even just opportunities as well. But I would also say in our day-to-day spaces, in our own networks, sometimes we must recognize that a lot of decisions are not made in offices. A lot of decisions are made on a golf course or in a bar. And what happens if I don't do golf or I don't drink? I am not included in that decision. So I have always promoted, and I've always loved where with colleagues, with peers, we create our own spaces as women to make decisions. I mean, I've been part of conversations with other women in the past year or two that I never dreamt of, because these are women who are relatively senior leaders, visionary, and we have a wine tasting, or we organize a yoga class, because this is a space that we can create for ourselves, which is relatively safe. We all have the same sort of mentality of this is where we want to go, this is where we want to explore. And this is something that we need to feel comfortable about doing, not in response of being left out of the usual golf course or bars or wherever else. It's because we too can make decisions and should be making decisions, and the best decisions are made where you are comfortable and where your peers are speaking plainly. So I would encourage, I say all of that, just if there are any especially up and coming persons on this call, that perception of that fear, that mindset of fear of, oh, I may get it wrong, or I may do it incorrectly, I may, my boss, they may not be happy with me. That's fine. A lot of strides and a lot of successes are found through taking measured risks. I'm not going to go out there and say go wild, but take measured risks, and also look for spaces like WIRE, or even amongst your colleagues, your friends, like-minded people, like driven people, to create spaces for yourselves where you can explore, discuss things that you may not have even thought about it, bounce ideas off of each other and create channels and pathways for each other. So I'll pause there.
I love the calculated risk advice, Naika. That's great. And creating spaces for dialogue and for leadership opportunities and decision making. Those are great points of advice. Tian, I'd love to hear from you a little bit about your perspective of why women's leadership in the renewable energy space is important, and then building on, we've been talking a little bit about mentorship, building on mentorship and capacity building. What do you see as really great opportunities for women in the space?
Oh, that's a great multifaceted one. Okay, let me take it a bit at a time. So I'll start with the leadership component. I think women in leadership can be so dynamic and so different. I think the economist in me can't help myself but to use the analogy of the multiplier effect. So I think with women, our reach is so much greater. We have more, our thought pattern is different. So as was mentioned, more on the technical side, or these things being heavy technical, that is a key component that women feel, oh, that's not for us, and then we conquer that. But I think beyond the technical aspects, we do have that human and social part of it, that I think women naturally have that empathy that reaches to those areas because of what we are called to be in so many facets of our lives. We have to be in the home, we have to be in the office, we have to be here, there, and everything. It requires so much of us, and to be different things to different people. And I think when that's represented in leadership, we can see the value in that, because it's not one dimensional. We can reach their various facets, and by telling our story, it makes it more real and relatable. So I think women in leadership needs to be amplified from that perspective, because it doesn't always have to be technical. There's so much more to it that needs to be considered beyond the technical space. And I think on the mentorship side, I've benefited from mentorship my entire life, and from different aspects. I've had male mentors, and I've had female mentors, and in that space with women and mentorship, it has made the most effect, or had the most impact on my life. I can remember right now joining Fortis TCI, I had a female boss, and she was a product of the WIRE mentorship program, and she was now a part of the network. And the minute my interest sparked in renewable energy, that's the first thing she recommended to me. You should apply for the WIRE mentorship program. Never heard of it, didn't have a clue. But what she did for me is what I think I think there's a cultural component to it too, especially in the Caribbean. Even though we're very much alike, we have our nuances and differences. And I think here on this side of it, we have a culture of gatekeeping, because we want that security in our jobs. We don't want to be threatened by others coming up, and breaking that stereotype and changing the culture, especially in the workspace for women, where we're not gatekeeping. The first thing she did was recommend the very same thing that worked for her. You should join the WIRE mentorship program. This is what it has done for me. And I know as you move in this space, these are the opportunities it could present for you. Educated me at the same time. I did the program, and honestly, my career has benefited greatly from it. So I think more opportunities need to exist, but there needs to be visibility and access. I think we need to know that these things are not out of reach for us, no matter what part of the world we are. But if we don't see it, we don't know what we can strive towards. We don't know the possibilities that are out there, the opportunities that we can be involved in, because we don't see that in action. We don't have the role models showing it to us. And if it's there, we wonder, do we qualify? Do we have access to even be a part of it? And I think the more we break down those silos and open it up, it provides for endless opportunities of different kinds of mentorship that I think can really work in this space.
So many great insights there, Tian. I love your perspective on the multi-dimensional perspective that women bring to leadership roles, and the multiply effect that you talked about, and the importance of women and men playing an important role in sharing opportunities and mentoring up and coming professionals. I think those are really important perspectives. Natisha, we'd love to hear from you about your experience. Why do you see women's leadership as important within the renewable energy space?
So it's so fascinating to listen to each of the speakers and getting to hear about the challenges that they face. So it's not very different for me and the sector in India. But let me speak from the grassroots perspective, because I think that's really where my work is, and what it means to have grassroots women leaders, especially in the energy space. Because if you break it down to the domestic consumption, it is the woman who is actually using most of aspects of energy. So in our programs, when we see that when our community leaders are women, the impact is achieved far more easily, simply because I think, like what Tian said, they are able to communicate from experience. They are able to communicate, understanding the family dynamics, understanding the cultural aspects, understanding the kind of problems that women face. So when they identify, they empathize, and then they say that, look, if I am able to come out of it and choose better for myself, so can you. So having women leaders in the entire value chain is absolutely essential for our programs to succeed, and our technology and our innovations to be accessed by more and more people, right down to the most grassroots level. I am fresh from a recent visit to one of the hinterlands of India, in central India, where I came across a very interesting program post-pandemic, when large number of tribals had to migrate for income opportunities and the kind of atrocities they face. A lot of them came back to their villages, and one of the grassroots organization decided to do a program for young tribal women to train them in repair of two-wheelers, simply because it's a very, very dense forested area and we don't have last mile connectivity. So they convinced a group of 50 women to go through a 21-day training program to repair two-wheelers, to repair punctures, to clear the oil filter, etc. And it's been 2 years. 40 out of 50 of those women have opened up their small garages right, at the farthest points of access. They've been able to stop migration of the male members of their family. They've been able to increase their income on a monthly basis. Some of them have started additional income opportunities by setting up a tea stall, or, getting into other income areas, running, small businesses through this. And their journey was not without challenges, because they broke into a male-dominated area, and they had to face a lot of issues early on. But now they are shining examples in their community, so much so that the other young girls from their community walk up to them and say that we want to be like you. And it's so interesting that we brainstorm on what other kind of skilling can we do. The initial set of ideas were the same. Let's get them a sewing machine training, or let's, do some cooking classes, etc., etc. But I think thankfully one of us said that, why don't we look at renewable energy? Why don't we look at solar light home assembly systems? Why don't we look at training them to repair solar water pumps and other, areas related to solar application? We have shining examples of how it has happened in other parts of the country. So why is it that we have to always think about these domains, that this is a male dominated area, so women can't enter it, or this is a female dominated area, so that's what she should be doing. But what I saw, and I was completely overwhelmed, was that if those tribal girls could do it, could come out of the silos of being under a male-dominated purview, then I think for the ones who are a little bit more privileged than them, It should be an easy choice if there is a choice. The other thing that I also have to say is that clearly there is a lack of mentorship opportunities when it comes to providing a safe space for women and providing a space where women can freely talk and discuss ideas and examples such as these. Now, how do we bring such examples to forefront, which is tucked away in small corners of a particular village in one remote corner where only people who go there are the ones who live there or, have come to do some research or something. So I do feel that there's leadership being played out in all corners by women. Um, there are shining examples of women who've been able to break, these dynamics, gender dynamics. Yet at the same time, they're very few, and the opportunity also is far and few. So I think the ecosystem needs to kind of have more of that opportunity where we see that women should be able to play or are capable of playing a role for a whole bunch of things. The technical aspect of it, yes, of course. And I, for one, don't see as to why women can't break into it. But then there are certain things that women can do so much better than men, because they come with that empathizing experience and empathizing attitude, which makes communicating so much more easier. But I have to say that, there needs to be more such opportunities. There needs to be more opportunities in urban spaces, and there needs to be a lot more opportunity in rural spaces because I think there is potential. There is dire need to pull out those women leaders in various fields. And I think renewable energy has to be one of the four front runners in it. Yeah, I do feel that there is a lot more work that needs to be done.
Thank you so much for sharing that context, especially of the importance of working to support women in rural areas as well as urban areas. I think you really touched on some of the challenges and both opportunities as well for women in rural areas to make an impact in the transition. I'd love to go a little bit deeper there with you, Nitisha, and hear your reflections in terms of how the energy transition is really helping to address a range of integrated development solutions. So, you talked a little bit about livelihoods. I'd love to hear a bit more about, access to water, health resources, nutrition, and how you see the role of women and the energy transition in helping advance those integrated development goals, especially in marginalized areas and rural areas, as you're talking about.
So I think that's one of the most critical learnings and observations that I've had, that if our approach is one-dimensional and we only look at addressing, the energy drudgery, let's say, but the other areas that sort of forms the entire ecosystem for a community where there is not proper availability of water, or not enough income opportunities, or there are health issues, or there are multiple issues that affect the growth of the community, then a lot of times the work that we are trying to do actually is very half-baked, because in income in communities where income doesn't come by for the entire year, their entire day is about trying to earn that money so that they are able to feed their families. And in that process, it's very difficult to engage them in conversations and opportunities that is going to shift the needle in terms of their energy requirement or any such things. So, and if you correlate energy with health, I think they go hand in hand. And when I talk about domestic energy, where most of my work is in access to clean cooking, if I'm only talking about clean cooking and I'm not looking at aspects like, where is their food coming from? What are they really cooking? Do they have light in their kitchen to be able to use an improved or a clean cooking mechanism? Does she have access to proper health care? Does she even know what are the kind of health challenges that she's facing? Does her children have access to education? Would she be able to support her family through income generation? The attention and the opportunity to grow only happens when we are able to talk to our communities with multiple lens. And hence, the programs that are designed or should be designed need to keep these frameworks into mind, that having just a single type of intervention sometimes backfires. It is because, we move the needle by a lot of work, putting in a lot of finances and resources, but because a natural disaster strikes, for instance, or we have a situation like pandemic, all the work that was being done actually is undone. So I think Clean Cooking Alliance has been focusing a lot in trying to bring some threads together, which looks at access to clean cooking with food security, health and nutrition together under one lens. Because that's a conversation that needs to happen together. It cannot happen in isolation. Now, one set of people can't be talking about access to clean energy for cooking and then ignore completely in terms of what are they really cooking, and how is their food secured. Similarly, when we talk about health, I mean, we all know that access to energy has a direct relation on health. But unless and until we are also addressing health issues parallelly when we talk about access to energy, it again will take a lot more effort and resources for us to then shift the needle in that time. Water, access to water, another thing where, if we do the calculation in terms of how much time does the woman need to collect the water for her household, and then juxtapose it with the amount of time that she requires to collect the firewood for her household. Between these two tasks, her entire day is over. So, when we talk about bringing them closer to renewable energy, we also have to think about how their access to water is being improved, so that, their drudgery is reduced from an overall perspective. And only when we are able to shift the needle across these three or four interdependent indicators can we then talk about development. Can we then talk about taking them to the next level where the leaders will emerge, and where they don't have to think about, am I able to provide food for the family? Let me go work in a farm right now and earn some money. I think I will come back to all of these points when my family has enough food. And often, I think in many, many marginal communities, that's the debate that goes in their homes. Should we just go and earn some quick money through some labor work, or should we really, really push ourselves to see, how can we change situation for ourselves and that of our community? So it's important for us practitioners to look at aspects of multiple things that overlap, overtwine, because that's what goes on in the day-to-day of some of these communities. They don't look at it in isolation. For them, it's every day. So we need to take into account all of these factors, or some of these factors, when we are thinking about how we are going to move them towards, a more renewable, cleaner environment.
That's a really great reminder of the importance of the integrated aspect of the work that we do around energy access and the energy transition, and that it's so impactful to many people's day-to-day lives, right down to their basic well-being. Sada, I'd love to go to you, building on Nitisha's comments. What is your perspective in terms of capacity building for women and thinking about this integrated aspect of energy access, about how it's more complex than trying to tackle climate change, as an example? What type of capacity building offerings do you think are important for women? We talked a little bit about mentorship. Are there other things that come to your mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say that in terms of capacity building for women in the context that I come from, there's often a sort of gap, as I've heard one of the speakers also mention, of how sometimes women don't think that they should they should learn certain skills. So perhaps even early on in their education, they wouldn't have studied this sort of engineering or tech heavy courses. So I think developing sort of technical capacity building workshops or programs could be very impactful, especially for women who want to pivot or transition into this space. And again, as I mentioned, I really can't overstate that sort of developing of those other soft skills that go beyond just the technical skills, because even just having this belief in yourself or confidence that you can achieve it, I think that provides a lot of value, and that's what propels you to even pursue some of these opportunities. So I think while these technical capacity building is important, there's also that need for that mentorship of somebody, yes, sure, guiding you or supporting you to develop the soft skills, which are much less structured than technical skills would be. I think both sides are pretty valuable.
Thanks very much for sharing that. So both soft skills and technical capacity building are really key here, I'm hearing. Naika, we'll change gears a little bit here, and I'd love to hear if you were to lead a utility or government ministry within your country, what would you do to advance women's leadership?
Oh, what a question. Having never worked in a utility or a ministry in my country, I would not deign to determine what they should do. I would have worked in a lot of IGOs and regional organizations in the Caribbean region. And what I have seen, I'm not going to name any names, but what I have seen is that women appointed to leadership is a matter of still counting numbers. We have a woman leader. Not not the value that this woman can bring, but okay, in senior management, we have 2 women and 3 men, we're fine. So what I would hope to see across the landscape, whether it be ministry, utility, IGO, regional organization, that we are not seen as figureheads or figure sticks or number to be counted. As Tian mentioned, there's a lot of value in women leadership, not just from the technical part, but there's a part where, as Saudatu also mentioned, the softer skills, the empathy, and in nature, just in nature, women outnumber men. This is just how nature works. So why would you want to exclude or isolate the majority of your population when it comes to decision making and steering and guidance? This will definitely impact your outcomes as it relates to whatever you are looking to achieve. If it's a program that you're looking to develop, or project, we've heard that, you know, there's projects that have been conceptualized in somebody's brain, and when it comes to implementation, and the project is meant for women, but when it comes to implementation, something as simple as the woman can't lift the table because the table order was too heavy. You know, so now your project is a failure, because if the table is meant as a critical piece of asset, whether it be to sell something, to move something, then it's now useless, right? So recognizing that there is value in women leadership, yes, the technical parts, but there's also value in recognizing that we do have slightly different needs, that in programming, in leadership, there are slightly different requirements needed to motivate persons as well. And these are the kinds of things I would love to see throughout the Caribbean region and at large when it comes to senior leadership, directorship, SG-ship, that we really not just seek because it's a woman, but this person has all of these characteristics, these values, and these values align with our core mandate, our core values as an institution. And this is how we would love to see our environment grow. Because of course, people work for organizations like RMI because the environment might be healthy, or the environment might be conducive to sharing and learning, and being as I'm losing my words, but being as encouraging as we can for each other. Not saying that men can't do this, but if you have a woman who can do this, it's not, oh, well, we will vote for Amber because Amber is a woman and we have 10 men as senior managers, so we need to balance it out. No. So I would love to see that this is something that is taken into consideration across the gamut, across the board. And it's not just, oh, yes, we have two women or four women, and no one can argue. So this is my input on that.
I really love that importance of elevating women for the full value they bring, not because they're women. And I think that's such an important message for all of us that are working towards continuing to support women in leadership. Tian, I'd love to build on this and hear from you. What is your vision and hope for realizing the full potential of women's leadership in the energy transition?
Oh, that's a great question. Very aspirational. And I think the possibilities are endless. And I think the opportunities need to become limitless to allow us to really dabble and get really into what we can really achieve and what we want to see, the change, as we always say, be the change we want to see. So I think as we have these conversations, I think we need to be very proactive and deliberate and what it is we want to see, what change it is we want to affect. And then that really can guide how we move in these spaces, the impact we can make. For example, I'll keep it very homegrown to my country, Turks and Caicos. Very small little gem in the Caribbean. And I think there's so much that can be done here. But I think the access and the visibility isn't always here in this space. And I think it's up to us, those who have benefited from being in those spaces and contributing to those conversations, to start bringing that down to the more grassroots level. As I browse some of the questions in the chat, it also provokes the thought of, how are we going beyond just the career and the professional space of persons who are already educated and probably just pivoting into different spaces now that, renewable energy and the clean energy transition is the order of the day. But how do we embed that at a grassroots level in the schools with our young girls? Whether it's high school, elementary, as low as we can go, to really start to expose them to what is going to be required of their generation in the future to really take this on and lead this. So we start to plant those seeds, nurture it, allow it to grow, because this is a relay. We're going to have to pass the baton on. And I think seeing those programs at the grassroots levels in schools, clubs, whatever promotes networking, because this whole notion that we've been trained that little girls are to be seen and not heard, we need to start undoing a lot of what has been told to us as little girls growing up. We need to be in those spaces. We need to speak up. We need to have those conversations. And when we embed that at those levels, we encourage them to know that those possibilities are out there. The opportunities can be endless for them and the future generation that they will have to carry on and live in. So we have to do our part now. And so my vision is one of really just carrying on that baton for the younger girls and the communities that we serve and we live in. Because what we really want to see is that change. We want it to be better for them. And we have to do our part now. So when I think about it, my vision from where I sit is just to make it a bit easier, so that the challenges and the struggles that we talk about now and that we have encountered is a bit different for them, they will have their own. But if we can make what we're dealing with now easier for them, then they're in a better position to conquer what lies ahead for them. So I think we need to do our part in leadership to have those stories be told, have it be seen, felt, heard. You know, we need it in action. Words are great. We can sit there and talk all day, but we need to see it in action, and we need to start measuring the impact that it has out there so that we can continue to do more of what actually works for the spaces and the communities that we are in.
Well, that was a really inspiring overview of your perspective, Tian. I love how you talked about starting young with girls in the schools and measuring impact as well. Natisha, we'd love to hear from you as well in terms of women's leadership. What's your vision for the future and realizing the full potential of women's leadership in the energy transition?
Sky's the limit, and I have seen that, you know, when women actually take charge, they really get it done. And not only do they improve their own lives, but they are able to affect the lives of everyone in their home and that also in the community. And I think that comes with the domain of being a woman, because you don't just think about yourself, you think about uh, everyone who's there in your ecosystem. So I would love to see more and more grassroots women get that opportunity where they're able to first take steps to change for themselves. And then I think when they take those initial steps, the following steps become a little easy for the ones who are behind them. And if we can create models that that are able to identify the potential, the early potential, start early through schools, and identify who those early leaders could be in each of the communities, help build their capacity. And I don't think it's a lot, because uh, the youth themselves are quite energized and quite charged. And these days they have access to a lot of information that I think was not available 10, 20 years ago. They are quite aware of the challenges that their own environment face. Um, it's just a question of connecting the dots and helping them find the way in such a manner that the capacities are built for them to become independent decision makers for their own lives, rather than somebody coming and telling them that, you know, we think you should do this. I think the narration that I would like to see in the leaders is that, yes, we want to do this because this is good for us, and this is going to be good for our future generation. So that's the hope with which we work, and that's the vision that we want to bring to whichever area that we work. That if you are willing to step out of that door and take maybe one step, then sky's the limit. And not only are you going to be able to do it for yourself, but you are definitely going to be able to affect a much larger change.
Thank you so much, and really thinking about identifying those young leaders, supporting them, and especially at the grassroots level. Well, there's so many amazing themes coming through this, and I know we want to move to our Q&A, so I'm going to pass it over to Vale.
Thank you. Thank you, Amber. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for such an inspiring discussion. We've received enthusiastic comments in the Q&A box, so thank you so much to our participants for submitting those, and thank you to anyone who submitted questions. We're now in the next 10 minutes going to address some of those questions to the best of our ability. So for this portion, I'm going to invite all of our speakers on screen together to address some of the questions. Great, thank you. So I wanted to start in chronological order, covering some of the questions from the Q&A box. And I know some of those have been partially addressed in writing as well, but we can somehow reopen the conversation about them as well. And I wanted to start with soda. I see there's a question on from Latifa on as a young graduate, how do I usher myself into the sector and really make a difference? I would love to hear Soda's perspective on this to start with, and maybe we can pair some of your insights, Soda, with the other question I see here on regional recommendations in terms of what to think about when choosing a career path to follow. So yeah, would love to start with you and hear your reflections on these two questions.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Valentina. It's a very important question because I know there are a lot of young people currently in the space trying to navigate it. I'm also one of them. So what I would say is that the best thing to do, first of all, is build your technical skills, first of all, right? And an approach to doing that is, first of all, determining your strengths. What is it that you're good at? What is it that comes easily to you? And ensure that you're able to excel in that. But also another very important and key thing is to look contextually at your environment or where you want to participate, right? So for example, for me, I live in Abuja, Nigeria, and where my interest lies is Nigeria and Sub-Saharan Africa. So looking at that space and identifying what problems are they currently facing in the renewable energy space. In Nigeria, for example, a major priority in that space at the moment is attracting financing. So think about if this is something you're interested in, think about how you can contribute to solving that problem. Could you develop skills that allow you to be able to attract financing, whether it's learning how to carry out financial modeling, etc. So developing skills that make you valuable to within the space makes it much easier to break into it because then you're coming from a place of value and then it's easier to break into the space. And I think it's important to go beyond what you've learned in school to actually engage in the space and learn what is happening on ground. This can be through internships, whether paid or unpaid. If you're starting out, like it's very important to get yourself involved, see what is happening, what are the events. There's so many events in the renewable energy space in Nigeria at the moment. There's always something happening, whether it's USAID or it's FCDO. There's always something. So it's attending events like that, I think, would develop your perspective. And lastly, I would say that so once you've identified your strengths and you've identified where you can provide value, hopefully you can find an intersection where you focus on. Then the next step is to develop your sort of networking, your network and your relationships, build a lot of valuable relationships, network as much as possible. And that makes it a lot easier to navigate the space and to break into it.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful overview. Yeah, I think a lot of those resonate with me as well, personally, reflecting on my own career journey. I'm curious to go to Tien and Nika next, and just wondering how what Soda just shared resonates with you, and how does that apply or maybe differ in your region in the Caribbean? And yeah, if you could tell us some more about what to think about when choosing a clean energy or more broadly climate-oriented career path in your region. Maybe we can start with Tian and then Nika.
Sure, thanks for that. I think from my perspective, a lot of what Sada said holds true in my neck of the woods as well. I think first research is important, determining what it is you want to do, what contribution you want to make, what impact you're looking to have is foundational to deciding where you go from there. I think Nika had already mentioned in the written response that it's really linear, you know. You can find yourself involved in this space from many different aspects. And I think you can also find what your strong suit is naturally, whether it's sustainability, whether it's finance, whether it's economics. You're rooted in that, and then you determine how you pivot from there to make your impact or your entrance into the space. I think there's various ways you can contribute. Networking is also key. I've learned that as someone who was very introverted and shy and didn't do well in those spaces. I would say that you would have to work on that skill personally, because if not, you're doing yourself a disservice of not exposing yourself to what networking can do for you and the opportunities it can present outside of the general working space where these conversations may not typically happen. And so you have to be open to the networking opportunities and putting yourself out there and in positions to land what could be internships, apprenticeships, scholarships, because now I think, especially in my country, we're really tailoring the support that we offer in for things that we desperately need in our country, and STEM is one of those big areas. So I think scouting out where those opportunities for scholarships and mentorship lies will be very important. And I think once you start to piece those together, it will start to fall in place. And as you navigate the space, you will find your space and where you fit in, and then you'll see where your contribution can be best made.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful answer. Nika, is there anything you wanted to add?
Well, after Tian and Sadatu, I don't think there's much I can add. Really want to emphasize research, but keep in mind that the space is still evolving, and climate and renewable energy touches on so many adjacent fields as well. So as a young person, we understand that you're gung-ho and you're excited and you want to be a change maker, but there's opportunity to explore. You might end up in disaster risk reduction. You might end up in agriculture, and all of these things have bearing on climate. Well, climate has bearing on all of these things. So again, do your research, determine what your interest is now, an entry point now, but don't think that you may need to, enter into a point of stasis where you've entered into this part of renewables or climate change and you have to stay there. No, the field is very dynamic, it's changing, it's growing, it's modifying. So be open to exploring new things. One other thing that I would even add is there's so many youth programs and I'm talking about at the international level, the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, CARICOM, which if I'm not too sure where you're located. So many developmental banks, IGOs, regional organizations, they have a lot of youth networks, which you can apply for. You can meet people from all over the world, all over the region, and you can learn from them as well as establish your own networks, which will also give you a foothold.
Thank you. Thank you for those wonderful additions. Nitisha, I wanted to turn to you as well to hear if there's anything you wanted to add here in terms of considerations to keep in mind when choosing a career path, if there's anything from the Indian context perspective as well that you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think one part that is very important is to also really try to get a first-hand experience of working with the communities, directly instead of relying on the information or data that is available only through research reports or case studies, etc. Because when we work with the communities, when we work in the actual implementation side, you may not choose to get into implementation at a later stage, but when you are able to hear the voices of the community firsthand, then a lot of decisions that you will take later on as a leader, that influence is something that is important for you to understand directly rather than being passed on through somebody else's experience. So that's something that I urge, a lot of people that I work with is we can sit behind our screens and we can peer through many, many reports and data sets. But at the end of the day, if that is not understood from a human lens that is presented directly by our communities or the users or the customers, whoever we are servicing, I think if that understanding is not held by the practitioner, then a lot of times when we are faced with difficult discussions, this perspective is missing. So I would definitely urge, anybody who's considering career in access to renewable energy, the user understanding is as critical as anything else.
Thank you. Thank you for that fundamental reminder. Absolutely agree with you. We only have a few minutes left, so I wanted to make sure we address the questions in chat as best we can. And I know there was a very interesting question on diverse leadership perspectives and how they're vital for effective climate action, as well as how we can best leverage women's leadership for convening and alignment. I think the question was focused on buildings, and thank you, Nika, for addressing that partially in chat. I was wondering if you wanted to add anything else here, Nika, or if any of our panelists had concluding thoughts on how to best leverage women's leadership for convening and alignment and the importance of diverse leadership for effective climate action.
If I may share,
Yeah.
share my thoughts. I think just over here in this panel, listening to all my fellow panelists, we may come from different geographies, but I think the thread, there are just so many common threads in each of our experiences. And these forums are great places to look at the sector, look at the opportunities, look at the problems that our communities face. And I think from here itself, a lot of it can be taken back in terms of multidimensional women's leadership, because when we find champions who sort of have, common objective, they may not be in the same physical space as you, but when you listen to other women across the globe, and you realize you're not the only one who's trying to kind of, fight it out there. And which is what I love about forums like these, which is what I love about, some mentorship programs that SE for All and Clean Cooking Alliance does, is even if we don't end up, learning too many skills, but the fact that it's a community and it is a common shared hope and vision for the future and our current scenario. And our problems, our issues, our solutions are not very different from, the other areas and other regions. And our issues are not different from what the other women leaders face. I think that itself kind of, helps. And if we can have more such, then it really kind of helps us keep going.
Thank you. Thank you for those concluding remarks, Nitisha. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for the great questions for our panelists. As we wrap up today's roundtable, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to our panelists for joining us and for bringing your unique experiences and insights to the table. And of course, thank you as well to all our participants for joining us today. We had over 65 participants for this roundtable, highlighting the important role of women in energy for so many organizations and individuals globally. For those of you joining the webinar from Sub-Saharan Africa today, we are also launching a survey for women working in renewable energy that I will drop in chat right now to help inform the design of future regional programs. As well, all participants will receive a link to an additional survey from RMI seeking your feedback on today's Women Roundtable webinar. Elevating women energy leaders who are driving the energy transition is a top priority for RMI, and we will continue to host these types of dialogues and support women's energy leadership through capacity development programs. For those who could not join us today, using the QR code on this slide, you will get access to the event recording and related resources within 24 hours of the webinar. We look forward to your feedback, and please do reach out to us at eta@rmi.org with ideas for future events, partnerships, and initiatives to support women in renewable energy, as well as any other questions. Thank you so much for joining again, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening.